So, welcome everyone. Josh the Metal Nerd here. And I've been planning a couple reviews for prior to Halloween for October, because Halloween is my favorite thing, but I did not get to indulge myself. Number one, I got lazy, and number two, I got a little bit busy with my daughter and fiance. But we're here, November 3rd, and we're going to talk about my most anticipated album of this year, the newest Cradle of Filth release, Existence is Futile. This was released on the 22nd of October, so I'm a few weeks late to the party on this one, but I still wanted to review this album. I've listened to it front to back at least 5 or 6 times. Cradle of Filth has been on a hot streak lately since 2015's Hammer of the Witches. They seem to have a resurgence with the addition of guitarist Rick Shaw and Ashok, and between Cryptoriana and this album, Lindsay Schoolcraft had left the band due to some personal issues, and we have Annabelle Arotny, who was the keyboardist for side project Devilment. And so coming into this album, I was a little bit apprehensive because the title was a little bit bland as far as Cradle of Filth album titles go, and also because this was they had 2 stellar releases, and sometimes their quality can be a bit inconsistent between albums. So I was worried that the streak was going to end, that we were going to have an album here that would not live up to expectations. So let's get into it. What did we get? And was it everything I expected, or was it a letdown? So for the press release, Danny says of this album is about existentialism, the existential dread and fear of the unknown. The concept wasn't created by the pandemic. We'd written it long before that began, but the pandemic is the tip of the cotton bud as far as the way the world is headed. The title Existence Futile sounds a little bit morbid, but again, it's more about recognizing the truth and saying that everything's permitted because nothing really matters. We all know we're going to die, so that we might as well indulge life while we possess it. So basically, the long and the short of it is this album, I don't like it as much as Cryptoriana, but it is a worthy successor to the past 2 albums. I would put it in my ranking. I would put it in between Cryptoriana, out of their new albums, out of their past 3, I would put it somewhere in between Hammer and Cryptoriana. Cryptoriana being a little bit better, Hammer being a little bit, I don't like it quite as much. So this is a 12-track affair, 14-track affair if you include the bonus tracks, which I do include the bonus tracks, because the bonus tracks are I feel like you can't have this album without the bonus tracks because they add so much momentum at the end. So with that, let's get into the actual music. You've got the obligatory Cradle of Filth intro, and then you've got Existential Terror, which has some amazing apocalyptic riffage, a lot of amazing vocals, the chanted vocals at the beginning, and some of Danny's darkest, not darkest, but most heaviest lyrics. Meaningless is this all there is, a flicker of life in a black forever. And then he says, Existential terror, 4 horsemen are pallbearers, riding nightmares of pure relief in the coming apocalypse. So it's basically about terror, and of course, he gets very blunt towards the end of it. Time to embrace the inevitable. We are all going to fucking die. So that is a great apocalyptic opener. Necromantic Fantasies kind of takes things back. It's one of my favorite tracks on here. It kind of takes things back to like the Victorian Gothic kind of melodic, old school Cradle of Filth ventures. It's got some incredible guitar work by Ashok and Rick Shaw. Great guitar solos and wonderful keyboards. I really, really like this. The first single off the album, but the next track was the first single off the album, Crawling King Chaos, and ironically, it's one of my least favorites. It's still good, and it's basically another thing about the apocalypse. Danny's vocal effects, I have mixed feelings. At times, I think they're awesome. At times, I think they're weird. But again, this is another decent track. Here Comes a Candle was another instrumental, and then we get to another one of the absolute standoffs, which is Black Smoke Curling from the Lips of War, which has a lot of those faster riffing, that has a lot of different things going on with it. Discourse Between a Man and His Soul is my absolute favorite, the standout of the thing. It's a more brooding, melancholy type, slower affair. And that refrain of farther I fell, and my favorite part of it is the part where nightmares slink in their dark layers, eyes are aflame there, waiting to sink their despicable teeth into me. And then it goes into that really harmonic guitar part right here. And when this is where the momentum begins to shift a little bit, where I don't necessarily... My least favorite track that's still good, The Dying of the Embers. I think that a little bit more work could have been done to flesh this out. It's a little bit more duller than the rest of the album, honestly, but it's still a good track. And then we have Ashen Mortality, which is another instrumental. How Many Tears to Nurture a Rose is a very reminiscent to Iron Maiden, with that galloping riff in the chorus. Suffer Our Dominion is another great standout track that kind of takes on a more serious note about climate change, and it has Doug Bradley returning finally, once again, Doug Bradley, to do some narration at the beginning, where he says, the ability to sustain life on Earth is shrinking in perfect unison with the rising population. Soon half of all species will be lost to climate change and ecological collapse due to human activity. Thus we either reduce our race voluntarily or nature will do it for us, and she will be fucking brutal. And this is just a wonderful, I think, honestly, if without the bonus tracks, I think the two last tracks should have been switched. Us Dark Invincible should have come first, and this should have come last. It would have been an epic closer for the album. And then we've got Us Dark Invincible, which is extremely catchy, but again, another one of the ones that I don't like quite as much. So that's where the bonus tracks come in. That's why if it was just for ending on Suffer Our Dominion, it would kind of end on a disappointing note for me, just a little bit. But then you have the second sequel to Her Ghost in the Fog in the form of a bonus track known as Sisters of the Mist, which is just chock full of classic Cradle sound, more amazing, amazing lyrics that and at the very end of it, he says, together victorious and legendary even in hell. And then there's Unleash the Hellion, which is a straight up banger of a track. I know I've spent a lot of time talking about this album, but I fucking love it. It combines, it's one of the albums that takes on a more serious topic than some of their other things, some of their other albums. Not quite as cheesy, but still full of those classic Cradle of Filth shenanigans, the theatrics, the gothic elements, the narrated female vocals, the twinkling keyboards that sometimes feel a little bit out of place. So, really the only tracks that I don't necessarily like quite as much are The Dying of the Embers and not Suffer Our Dominion, goddammit. Us Dark Invincible. Those two I don't like quite as much. In Crawling King Chaos, I sort of have mixed feelings towards a little bit. But all in all, this is everything I could have expected for a new Cradle album. This continues on their new era, their streak, their hot streak that they've been on as late. Their two guitarists, Rick Shaw and Ashok, are the two most technically sound guitarists they've ever had. They do more lead guitar work and soloing than anything that Cradle did in the past. They continue that trend here. They continue, and then they continue to morph into their own identity instead of continuing to throw back and try to recapture the lightning in a bottle from old era of Cradle of Filth, the way they had done on Cryptorania. This is a brand new. They don't do a lot of new things, but in a way it's a brand new sound. It's a new identity. This is where they sound. They really sound like their own version of Cradle of Filth, and not just like they're trying to recapture the glory days. And that's really the charm of this album, and the charm of that it is an album that really reflects what's going on in the world today and how apocalyptic and chaotic things are, with amazing guitar work. Martin is again incredible on the drums. Annabelle Arotny is her keyboard presence is well accepted and well defined within the confines of this music, and her vocals are very much reminiscent to Sarah Jezebel Deva. So again, I don't know what else I can say about the album. It's a solid 9.5 out of 10. It will definitely be really high up on my list. I don't know if it'll make number one on my end of the year list. There's a lot of stiff competition, but this is definitely one of my favorite albums that I listen to and come back and run through it over and over again. Cradle of Filth is my favorite band. I'm a big fanboy, and so this album delights me. And I'm completely satisfied with the album. 9.5 out of 10. Cradle of Filth. Peace, motherfuckers.